Hello everyone, it's Brian, and welcome back to Twilight Struggle Play the Experts, where I play the experts and you learn how to pronounce Ziemowit correctly. Now, last time we started with a handful of Soviet cards and had to resort to playing Nasser and Fidel. We then failed our counter coup in Iran, leaving us pretty well locked out of the Middle East. We committed to South Korea and managed to get in there safely, spacing the war, but then Europe and the Middle East not looking so good. We did just barely beat him to Thailand. In the second round, we did get to see his hand, and knew Asian scoring was coming, so therefore we disposed of Europe for non-domination. We filled up Asia, but on the heels of constant domination threats, he managed to roll over half of Africa, which was pretty scary. We finally stopped his advance in Cameroon, and that is where things stand. We did also get Formosan Resolution played so that in the future we have a chance to possibly dominate Asia ourselves. The score stands at 0, but the board sure looks red. It looks red, it looks communist, it looks scary. So, we have some things to talk about. First of all, my opponent did point me in the direction that the proper pronunciation of his name is approximate. This is the best I can do, Ziemowit. I hope that was almost right, but in any event, it's a lot closer than Ziemowit. Just what I said last time. So I am happy that he was paying attention enough to know that I couldn't pronounce his name properly, so that is excellent. Now, before we head into a headline phase, let us quickly go back in time, because I had a couple of people point out something to me on turn 1 action round 3, the Soviet play, because what he did was fill up some more Middle East, and in particular Lebanon, to establish domination. That was at the point where I was down to nothing but my guy in Israel. They were the slightly pro-U.S. Israeli government was all we had anywhere, even near the Middle East at that point. And what I didn't notice, because what hadn't happened yet at the time, and then by the time it happened, I had already had a chance to fill Jordan, is that later that turn, we saw our opponent play the Suez Crisis for ops. And some folks pointed out to me that that is actually interesting and maybe an oversight, because if for his action round 3, he had activated the event Suez Crisis, then he would have, he'd have removed 2 guys in the UK. It would have been a pretty sad UK situation, but much more importantly, he would have removed my 1 guy in Israel before I had a chance to expand out of Israel, and I would have had absolutely nothing left in the Middle East. And honestly, unless I get the Marshall Plan, I'm not even close to being adjacent to the Middle East, let alone in it, let alone having a presence. And boy, that sure does look like that play might have locked up a grotesque 7, 8 or more point scoring for the Soviets. So it's interesting, possibly he overlooked it. I could imagine myself overlooking something like that, thinking, it's not normal to quote-unquote activate Suez for the event during the turn. Sometimes you headline it, but often you just leave that one in the deck for the for the U.S. to draw and have to deal with, and you take the 3 ops, right? And of course, it's also normal when you're ahead in the Middle East to go ahead and, create the domination threat, in case I had the card. But if you don't have had the card, it would have been something like a 5-point swing right there, which is better than a 4-point swing for regular. It was still as good as it was going to be. So, yeah, that's just an interesting point. I haven't had a chance to ask the opponent if that was just a miss on his part, but congratulations for the couple of people that mentioned to me for spotting that, because, you don't get many unusual plays that might be oversights by players. It's good. So good spotting other people. And now let us return to headline phase of turn 3, where it is time for another episode of the Defectors Turn 3 Head Fake game. That's right, folks. We're holding Defectors. And because it's turn 3 and because this wasn't like a reshuffled card, he knows that we have defectors, and we know that he knows that we have defectors, and so on ad infinitum or ad nauseum. So this is always the time when you get to play a little game of chicken with the Soviet player, and the Soviet player gets to play a little game of chicken with you. Because, well, first of all, in terms of standard U.S. early war headline cards, that's the only one we have. Now, there are some other headlineable cards, and I'm going to go into those. But Defectors is the sort of, it's the one that jumps out at you, right? As a like, well, that, I know how to headline that. And the thing is, several things. Well, so when he knows we have Defectors, some of his, he could go ahead and take a risk and try to headline some awesome card, or he can try to sort of slough off a bad card and hope that we defector it. So, say he redrew Asian scoring and he really wanted to take a risk, and say he thought, well, Asia's locked up anyway, I'm going to have to give him the 5 points for Asia, and so why not just get it over with, and maybe maybe he plays Defectors and, has egg on his face as he watches 5 victory points go into the discard pile. So there's that. Or he can kind of hedge his bets and slough off or semi-slough off a sort of bad card where it's not an utterly grotesque card for him, but it's one he kind of wants to get rid of, and maybe I'll defector it and then he doesn't have to worry about it, etc., etc. Or he can do one that he'll do one that is just a kind of boring one, like sort of like Romanian abdication was for him the first time, one where it's like, oh, okay, well, whatever, maybe he gets defectors, maybe not, or he can just let it rip and play a really good card. Now, one piece of important, or I should say 5 pieces of intelligence that we have are the cards that we know he's holding. And the interesting thing is none of these make particularly glorious headlines for him. You can imagine a situation where De Gaulle or Indo-Pakistani War might have been a good headline for him, but it's not this, right? Or they're not great. I mean, he could do Indo-Paki just to try to get the 2 victory points, right? I mean, that's certainly if he doesn't want to take a lot of risk in his headline phase, that's a perfectly acceptable headline. Maybe he gets 2 victory points, maybe he doesn't, right? 50-50. But he doesn't lose a whole bunch if I defectored it. But De Gaulle, France has already spoken for, or rather, he already totally has it locked down. So there's nothing big going to go on there. So that is an interesting thing. He doesn't have a lot of known really good or really bad cards. You can think of some bad cards that could be out there. You could think of some good cards that could be out there. Now, two really good cards that I will apparently not be defectoring this turn are decolonization and destalinization because I'm holding them. So that's actually a piece of epically good news that we're going to get to, stop some of his overseas spread by basically, spacing one of and the spacing decolonization, presumably, and then discarding destalinization of the blockade. That'll put them both in after the reshuffle, so we won't see those cards again for a long time, hopefully. But anyway, Defector's Head Fake game. It's just that I don't see a lot of huge cards necessary. He may not even have a great headline, and so that's a minus. That's a minus. Now, he doesn't necessarily have a horrible card to slough off either, but I'm not super excited, and on the whole, my rule of thumb is I normally don't play defectors on turn 3, headline defectors on turn 3 as the U.S. if I can think of something better to do, right? Or something that'll definitely work. If I don't desperately need to do the defectors, then I look for other options. And so here are a couple other options. One is we could actually headline blockade and just go ahead and get de-Stalinization discarded right in headline phase and move on with our lives. That isn't bad. Keep in mind, if you ever think about headlining blockade, to make sure that you have a 4 card in your hand also, because there's always the possibility that he could, in this case, he could have redrawn Red Scare Purge, and he could be about to purge me, in which case I would suddenly desperately need a card that I could discard to the blockade at the purge level. So I might want to know about that. It might change the way I would go about the turn. But I think I have an actually better headline and safer headline than that. And believe it or not, it's the Middle East scoring card. Because here's the thing. Like right now, he gets what? Looks like 5 points if I score it now. And it's not going to get any better really during the turn, right? I mean, I guess I could fill up Israel, but he's got 2 countries he could fill up. And, is it really worth toothing and clawing? It's just not going to get better. Let's put it that way. If we fill up countries, he's going to fill up countries. In a situation where the board position already favors him, I wouldn't want to just play a whole bunch of influence, kind of for nothing. So that's a thing. It's not getting any better, and of course the Middle East is worth 0 ops. I mean, blockade is at least worth 1 op, right? That's not a lot of ops, but it's more than 0 ops. And so if we can, since we know that the Middle East isn't going to get any better, it could get worse, but it's not going to get worse during headline phase. There's nothing he could headline that would actually make the Middle East worse for us. Then it seems like that's the headline. Now, obviously, we have not had brilliant, amazing headlining hands this game. Maybe that'll change later. But for now, that is what we're going to do. We're going to headline the Middle East, see what he has got for us in exchange for 5 victory points. He has, in fact, got an Indo-Pakistani war. So that was his kind of hedged little bet. And it turned out good for him. He didn't get defectored. He did roll well enough to get the 2 VP, and he gets 5 VP. So now he's got 7 VP. So that's exciting. And here comes de Gaulle taking the long predicted coup in Panama, and now you see the exact situation where it is good that we put our guy into Costa Rica earlier so that we're going to be able to get back in. He kind of woofed the coup, but now we're adjacent. If we hadn't been in Costa Rica, well, we wouldn't have access to Panama anymore, and we'd be just looking at him sitting there dominating in Cuba, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Now, my opponent made an interesting comment a second ago. He said his play was rather soft last turn, meaning turn 2, especially in Asia. And that's interesting because I thought his play was devastating, especially in Asia, or rather the fact that he used the threats in Asia to systematically take over the northern half of Africa. So it's interesting. Did he have time to do anything? I mean, Thailand is a pretty thick plug. If he'd had access to Indonesia, where he could have flipped control of it or something, but he's not touching it, and I've got all the other things controlled. I don't think he had tempos to do that. The only thing I could think of is if he's thinking instead he should have crammed the entire China card into South Korea, kind of go into 4, and really contesting me for that. And so I guess the question is, what would he have not done instead? I don't think he would have wanted to not counter coup in Cameroon. Let's see. What did he do with his... Well, I guess the turn that he went into Cameroon and he overprotected France and put the little guys around Cuba, I guess he could have either held on to U.S. Japan or used it to go to 3 in South Korea. So, sure, yeah. So he could have fought harder for South Korea, and maybe I wouldn't have been able to hold on to it because, he certainly had plenty of ops holding the China card, a 5-point China card as well. Or I would have had to, do something horrible like use Formosan resolution to get it back. So maybe that's true. Maybe he could have fought harder, but we'll see how things go. I mean, I thought his move was a reasonable one, going ahead and getting all dominating in Central America, but particularly with Asian, at least having done its early war scoring. It's not like Asia was doomed to come up this turn. But we'll see. We will see. In any event, he has de-Gauled himself, and we must make a set of decisions. So, important things for us to do this turn. I didn't completely talk about our plan here. It's very important for us to get into Angola. That's the country. Namibia doesn't actually exist in this in this game. I always think of it, what is just northwest of South Africa? I always think Namibia for important geographical reasons, but the answer is Angola. And the reason we need to get there is so he can't reopen the festering wound that is Cameroon and force us into a cooing back and forth situation to see who can get to Zaire first. We want to guarantee we can get to Zaire before him. I'd like to close West Germany back up and maybe start to fill some of those little countries in Europe, because that might keep us in the game on European domination a little bit, or on preventing his domination. And I'd like to get back into Panama before he decides to realign me out or something like that. So those are some things I want to do. I think I'm going to go ahead and play one of these 4 ops, because it's basically 4 ops and then very tiny ops. And I'm going to go to Panama, the all-important Angola, and I'll go ahead and fill West Germany up, and we will see what he's going to do. Okay, special relationship again. This is just not a very special. Lots of Anglo-American tension this game. No special relationship. So he's filling Spain, which could be a sign that Europe is about to rescore. I'm not sure. I want to get at least one, get something adjacent to Italy so that brush war is a little less likely to flip it. That's also why I wanted to close up West Germany before he could come piling in, because I don't want to end up with just one country in Europe if I can, since he knows Truman Doctrine is shuffled back in. So he's playing the China. Oh, and here he comes. He is cramming the whole China card in. So he is regretting his earlier decision not to contest Asia more firmly. Maybe Asia's going to rescore. And the interesting thing about the cram the cruncher full of China strategy is that notice he gets to actually go to 4, which means that only if I have a 4-op card can I restore control of South Korea. So it's kind of a gambit. He's like, well, you just played your 4-op, so I'm going to think it's more likely that you don't have any more 4-ops, and therefore, oops, right? Because he doesn't actually know we have either of those 4. All the cards that he knows we have are small, and he played one of the cards he didn't know we had, and so there's only 2 other cards he doesn't know what they are. Anyway, so it's a calculated risk. In this case, fortunately, not going to pay off because we do have another 4-op card, and we are happy to trade it for getting to hold the China card now. So here comes Suez Crisis. Again, he seems to get these cards back and forth. Okay, so he is continuing his European domination thing and overprotecting North Korea. Now that I could play the cram the entire China card in strategy next turn. In fact, I would be, the U.S. can do it as an action round, 7 in this case thing, so that, then he'd have to choose between that and his coup, blah, blah, blah. So once you've given the China card to the U.S., good to go to 4 in North Korea. All right, so we are getting down to some yucky little obligations here, and let's go ahead and get blockade out of our life forever. and we will send destalinization to the blockade. And we have just the place to put one op, which is to go ahead and spread into Africa as we had planned. So at least we got some chunks of Africa. He's going to start cooing them up. So he is playing NORAD for the space race, and he gets in and he gets his point. So that's good. Yeah, he probably didn't want to give us NORAD. Yeah, we just played. Wow, these cards keep coming back because we had just played NORAD, and now he's played it. So yeah, Suez, special relationship. And here is decolonization, and we will send it to space. Ba-boom! Well, that's 2 victory points back for us, which is, we've gotten, a net 3 on the scoreboard from, over, he got 1 and we've gotten 4, so that's 3 up, which is certainly not as many points as he has, but it's more than nothing. And when you think about it again, there is certainly something to the sort of sanct idea that it's imagine the situation reversed. That's a 6-point swing, right? Those are points he's gotten the 1 point he can ever get back. He got his first little box there, but he can't get back the other point from the first box, and he can't ever get back the fact that he can't get 2 points from the third box, and he's got a long way to go to the 5th box. So there's certainly something to that, and we certainly had some plenty horrendous enough cards to send to the space race that it's good that we sent them. Obviously, we do qualify for a second space shot, but we have not had time to do that. If I had spaced, I couldn't space and play blockade and blah, 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 blah. Get all the stuff I wanted to get done. So here we are. All right, Warsaw Pact. It's a card we knew he had. He's playing it for influence. Wow, here he comes again. And this time we can't do anything about it, but that was his 6th play, so he can't. It's not like he's got the Asian scoring card, but he is really. That's interesting. I am just going to go ahead. So this turn we have to play UN for merely influence. Again, by the way, that's the second time we've had UN, and the second time we're playing it exactly for influence and not the event, because there just wasn't hand room to mitigate anything and still have a card for every action round. And I'm going to go ahead and effectively claw back a victory point by taking a coup in one of these non-battlegrounds. I think I'm going to go for Cameroon, just to kind of put Nigeria on notice that I'm next to it, and I could do a 3-card flip if his first action was to take a coup in, say, Zaire. Well, then I could come flooding into Nigeria, something like that. And then we'll see, and I'll hopefully have time to get back into South Korea control before Asian scoring. But it's certainly at least a gambit on his part that, hey, maybe he draws Asian scoring and can headline it, and then my entire Formosan resolution is for nothing. So we will see. Meanwhile, we get a 4 on our coup, and we go, losing only 1 point rather than 2 to military ops. We go to turn 4, the first turn of the mid-war, and we draw another mixed bag. A mixed bag indeed. That's interesting. So South America scoring is at best useless because we have no way to get into South America. So we'll probably just be scoring it off before he has a chance to get into South America, although he has relatively few ways since we're holding the Salvador Allende card, another foreign word pronounced at least marginally correctly by yours truly, thanks to commenters everywhere. So we will definitely be scoring South America, hopefully for nothing, and definitely before we play Allende. So let's see other cards. Liberation Theology is bad. We Will Bury You is kind of bad in the sense that, well, if we did it really soon, it would score him 3 victory points. And if we did it not really soon, then it would make him instantly win the game through a nuclear war. But the interesting thing about it is because it's a 4 card, while we're holding this, it makes it much more difficult and risky for the Soviets to play or even headline the Missile Envy card, that card we hate so much, that makes us give him one of our good cards in exchange for a kind of mediocre card. Because if he played Missile Envy and it was DEFCON 2, then he would get to instantly lose the game because Missile Envy makes the event go off if it's the event of the guy who played the card. And there's so many ways. I don't actually have one of them this turn, but there's so many ways that I could drop DEFCON and headline. I could play Duck and Cover, Grain Sales, How I Learned to Stop Worrying. There's at least one more. Well, CIA's out. I think there's even another one, Junta. And most of those are, many of those are kind of no-brainer headlines for me. If I have Grain Sales, I'm going to play Grain Sales. If I have Junta, I'd definitely be headlining Junta. So in that case, if he'd headlined Missile Envy, then he would get to lose the game. And so he won't be headlining Missile Envy when he doesn't know where that card is yet, unless he gets extra desperate. Certainly nobody who is ahead 7 points on the scoreboard is going to be taking a risk like that. So anyway, this is all to say that I actually am more likely to space Liberation Theology than We Will Bury You. Flower Power, we're just going to have to suck it up and give him the event and play it for 4 ops because we need the ops. At least we don't have a war card this turn, and hopefully we won't get many later. Kitchen Debates. Boy, would it be nice to be able to play that for 2 points, but I just don't think we're in range because of our grotesquely bad situation in the Middle East and the fact that I don't think Taiwan actually counts as a battleground for this purposes. We're just not in... We're not in range. We're not in scoring range of Kitchen Debates, most likely. So we won't be able to do that. Truman Doctrine is back and probably is just going to be played for ops this turn. There's no big, important European stuff looking like it absolutely must be done. And then Nixon plays a China card. I'd like to play that for 2 victory points rather than some kind of China card trick. Because, of course, anyway, if I play the China card, I lose Formosan Resolution. So I certainly don't want to do that before we've at least scored Asia once if we can manage to make it score. Because, of course, we're down to victory point 2 influence points in South Korea. So we don't even dominate right now. So we've got our work cut out for us. We need a headline. There's 3 headlines we could do. There's South America. It could walk right into a junta. Of course, if he's going to do a junta, then that might be the best outcome anyway. Nixon plays China card. We've got all turn to play it. There's no big hurry. Red Scare Purge actually makes me kind of want to do it because all the things going on here, the little Nigeria thing, the South Korea thing, he's going to take a coup. All of those are ops-based things. And I feel like he has more, I don't have anywhere to go with ops right now. I mean, I could go to the Middle East, but it's kind of minimal value with the Middle East already scored for the next long period of time. So I don't actually, and I can't get to South America, which I would love to be in, and it's not hard for me to fill South Korea back up. And Europe is mostly decided. I'll probably try to keep on putting some points in there. But I feel like he needs ops worse than I need ops because he's got important OPEC reasons to go into the Middle East as well as all these other countries where we want to go. He might even be wanting to go in South America if he does have a way in. And so I want to cut his ops. I do want to cut his ops, and so I think it's going to be a Red Scare Purge for him. Let's see what he does. He's OPECing. All right, so that's interesting. That's interesting. So he's taken his 3 victory points, and let's just observe that right in his grasp were, well, really 3 countries if you count the Gulf states, but 2 battlegrounds in Iraq and Saudi that We're in his range. So it's interesting, you know, often if I have OPEC and I got that situation with the Soviets, I want to go ahead and fill it up and get even more victory points, right? You know, because then they're going to come back and work again. Now, Middle East scoring is out, et cetera, et cetera. But it's just, so it's not like this is a bad play. It just tells us something about his hand, and it might mean that he actually didn't even have a lot of ops to begin with, and then we purged him. So this could be, that could be a good sign, because there's no better time to purge somebody when all of their cards are twos, right? Because then the twos become one, you know, which cuts them in half. It makes the most relative blow to him, plus it reduces him to hardly any. And of course, if he has any my cards that he, like, you know, green sales, then he can't even space them, and he doesn't have the China card, so he doesn't have a lot of room in his hand, blah, blah, blah. So, hey, we got some, we might have some good pressure on him. That's a good sign. Now, here comes socialist governments for a coup. Yeah, he doesn't need it in Europe because Europe is pretty well dominated by him. Unsurprisingly, he goes to Zaire. Surprisingly, he rolls kind of low and just, like, I think he's glad to use that 3 card to quote-unquote make sure, or almost make sure. But he got in there. Does still put it in, you know, in gobbling range. But I'm going to go ahead and close up South Korea before he can do anything about it. Let's just go ahead. He's been so determined to crunch in there. I'm just going to go ahead and overprotect it. And I'm going to overprotect Angola so that he can't do the 3 ops thing to me. And we'll leave the 3 ops threat on against him for him to deal with. See if what his sitch with Africa is. All right, so Muslim Revolution for influence, right? He doesn't have a lot, you know, he can only wipe us out of Jordan, so he'd much rather have the influence. All right, he is grabbing, he's overprotecting all of his countries, even Algeria, okay? Well, so far he's certainly got ops. Those were reasonably big ops cards. Certainly I can see why Nigeria and Zaire need overprotecting. You know, I could have probably imagined a different place to put something than Algeria, given that I still haven't even filled South Africa yet. But let's just see what happens. He may have hidden reasons. I think it's time to get rid of South America. It's worth 0. There's nothing happening here that's going to give us any more any influence there, and we're going to have to deal with Allende at some point, and so let's get that scored off first. 5-year plan to space. Interesting. Okay. Now, obviously, that means he probably doesn't have a quote-unquote bad scoring card. So he probably, if he had the Asian scoring card, well, first of all, he'd probably headline it, and if he hadn't done that, then he would have wanted to vaporize it with 5-year plan at the end of his hand, unless he had some other horrible card that's so horrible that he couldn't play it out safely, like if he's got grain sales or something like that, which keep in mind he can't space this turn because of, right? So that's it, and then also he can't space any of his 2 cards, so spacing a 3. So it's good to see him have, you know, that his only card for space is something that I'm not all that sad to see go, right? Because if he had managed to save that till later, then it could have been a doozy for him. So either he's just got he got a good hand and no other card he wants to space, and he wants a space shot to keep me from taking 2 space shots, which, you know, by the way, I could, if he hadn't had succeeded, you know, spaced both Liberation Theology and We Will Bury You, if, you know, otherwise I had time, which is actually probably a reasonable way forward. As much as it's sort of good to save We Will Bury You, it doesn't necessarily mean you wrap yourself around a tree about it to do it. So anyway, he spaced that, he got in, no more 2 space shots, but there is 1 space shot. All right, we have successfully spaced Liberation Theology, and so we'll get to see his headline next turn. That is definitely something. And Camp David Accords for influence, so I'm sure he's not super happy about that because he's giving us a victory point and only getting 1 op out of it, and he's seeding the Middle East with our little babies, which does notice that Camp David sticks the key one guy in Egypt that makes the Sadat card, it activates Sadat, fully activates Sadat, meaning that'll go straight to complete control of Egypt as soon as we play the Sadat card, or he plays the Sadat card later, so that's a good thing. So that was a card I'm sure, he would have much rather spaced, say, instead of a 5-year plan, perhaps, but he couldn't space it because of Red Scare Purge. So that was a dividend of Red Scare Purge. Yay, Red Scare Purge. All right, let's get our 2 victory points, because we really need to constantly clawing at the victory point chart to kind of keep it within reason, keep him from being able to have horrible threats to us that we have to respond to even more unoptimally, lest he get to 20. So, colonial rear guards. Man, we hit pay dirt with the purge this time. He couldn't space that bad boy either. And maybe he doesn't have, I wonder what he's going to be, what his hold card is, because there's not many cards worse than this for the Soviets. Maybe he's holding grain sales or something and just absolutely has to keep it out of our hand. So here comes colonial rearguards. Now, this makes some of his earlier plays make a little bit more sense. I was sort of, all this overprotecting of Algeria and Laos, Cambodia, and all that stuff, which, it's all fine and dandy, but we already dominated Asia, so why would we want Laos, Cambodia super bad? Like, why was I going to just pay a big 3 card? But now it makes sense, because he has had to, he was using his big ops to kind of prepare the way for his bad ops, which is actually going to make this a lot less bad for him than it would have been. Because he's only got 1 op to respond to me with. Like, into one of these countries, he could fill a single op. And I'm going to do that. If he had left me something, I'm not going to go into Algeria when I've just gotten, I'm going to be in range in at least one of the other 2 countries. And what I'm going to do is just go ahead and create this little realignment threat, because it doesn't seem like he has a lot of ops. He's already gotten a coup. And so I'm just going to try to put some pressure on him by threatening to realign Zaire at +1. Not that I actually honestly have a lot of ops to realign him with, if you look at the beautiful rest of my hand, but it's pressure on him. And even when I can't follow through on the pressure, I kind of want to put the pressure. And let's also see what he does. So his point goes into a coup on Zimbabwe to shut the threat up. Fair enough. But he fails with a 1. Wow. Well, his coup, his coup rolls have turned a little cold on him. He got that important fire, and I got that horrible 1 on turn 1, which was a very bad time to get it. But I am certainly happy to have him just go ahead and roll a 1 now. I'll take what I can get, and I just need to take a realignment here and hope I roll something good. And I do, and he's out. Wow, we've got our chunk of Africa back. So no dominating Africa for him. He will probably score it instantly for 0 if he's holding the card. But he's not. He's got another of our events. Now this time a high op value event. Okay, so he is very determined to hold on to Nigeria now. I don't know why he felt like he needed to double over control it, but he decided to do it. Maybe he didn't have anything where else he really wanted to go. Although, again, like, what about the Middle East? It's someday. But anyway, he did that. It's fine. And we get a fairly uninspiring 7 victory points. His grand plan of keeping Marshall away. But now he's going to go ahead and play it. But the thing is, at this point, he's already grabbed most of the good stuff, and we've already got the stuff we're going to get. It does put us a little bit, we'll go ahead and get back into Canada and the UK and reinforce Germany, and then we'll just get some guys sprayed around here to get in range of contesting his domination, on country count purposes. So he has to worry about us doing that sometime at the end of the turn. Poke 1 here. Oh, we still have more influence. Finland, I suppose, to create the touching his toucher threat, or Austria, just to be closer to something we could actually fill up if we get into some huge ops war in Europe later, which I think is honestly pretty unlikely. But we are well seated into Europe, but obviously he's mitigated he didn't want to give me that card, but he's mitigated it pretty well because, he still dominates Europe and he's still reasonably in range of more dominated Europe. If I tried to fight it, he has places he can fight back. All right, so kitchen debate. Unfortunately, we didn't get into range to do it, so I'm just going to play it for an op. And this new contesting domination of Europe idea does seem a little bit new and shiny, so I'm going to fill Canada up. And oh my goodness, the voice of America! Wow. We had a really bad hand on turn one. It is fair to say that he had a really bad hand this turn. Now, mind you, he had a somewhat bad hand, and we turned it into really, really bad with the purge. So it was a good turn to purge. But yeah, it's a really bad hand. Now, unfortunately, he's already hit on the scoreboard and the map board, and he had to turn to, he did have some big ops card, which he did a really good job of preparing for playing these absolutely horrible cards. And of course, I wasn't really, who really expects your opponent to play Camp David, followed by Colonial Rear Guards, followed by Voice of America, all for the event, right? When does that happen? So I'm not super prepared for that. Not that I could have done a huge amount, but it's harder than usual to find 4 really painful points to take off for him with Voice of America. So I'm going to take 1 point off from Nicaragua. And the reason I'm doing that, or I'm not taking 2 off, is because this way, in theory, I could, in my last action round, when I have to play Allende, it gives me a good coup with him for an op point into Haiti, which then I would have establishing hopefully a +1 realignment advantage against Cuba. It's a good action round 7 play for me. I would set up there. And I'm not taking both off, because if I took both off, then I don't have a way to coup and get the +1. So it's actually more of a threat to only take one of them off. And sadly, the only battleground that I can... So now I understand why he double over-controlled Nigeria, because he saw this was coming. So the only one I can forcibly denude in a way that gives me a possible advantage is Libya. So let's take Libya off, and that gives us a way in. And then I'm really lost for what to, taking his over-control point out of Algeria doesn't sound good. Egypt, he's already going to lose those influence points anyway when Sadat comes up. Lebanon, big deal. I guess I'm just going to eat Iran, because maybe in theory I could walk over there through Iraq and fill it out and whatever. At least he'll want to put it back at some point, even if not right away. But I just can't think of anything. Can you think of a better thing for me to do with my 4th point of Voice of America, keeping in mind that Europe is not eligible for Voicing of America? Tell me in comments if you do, because I couldn't think of anything else. So then he gets to play 1 amazing influence point, and it is putting he agreed that Cuba threat was a Cuba threat. Oh, and he would like us to play one of his cards now. He thinks he's been a very nice opponent, playing 3 or 4 of my cards. 4, really, yeah, Marshall Plan 4. And he thinks I ought to have to play 1, and please let it not be Brezhnev, which is fair. And it does turn out I do have one for him, and it is Allende. I'm going to need to go ahead and take a coup to get another 1 military op turn for me, but at least I'm clawing him back 1 at a time. And even though he restored his thing, I'm going to go ahead and take the Haiti coup. Oh, and it looks like I'm going to roll a 1 also. But honestly, if you need to get your 1 out of the way, that was a relatively unimportant coup. He's into Chile. If I hadn't needed military ops, I could have done the infamous Hail Mary 1 realignment roll against Chile with the Allende card, but I felt like getting the Essentially, that was essentially 1-0 for 1 victory point there. So that seemed efficient. So we go to turn 5. He gets his victory point from ops, and we I've been playing cards right back at him so quickly he thinks we're going to play all the rest of the game out right now. But what we're going to in fact do is go to homework. Now, we get to see his headline. He is headlining Junta because he wants to and because it's a pretty reasonable thing to do. And we have this hand. And I'm not going to comment on it because I want to know, and I want to know in comments, what would you do with this hand? What would you headline? Where would you go? What are the things you're going to do? Think about those things. Tell me stuff in comments. Do your homework in comments, and then tell me what you think about any of the things that went on in these turns. Let's see, last time we had the Stalinist version of the Russian lyrics, and so, there was a period then, we're gonna do the no lyric version this time, because there was a period in between after Stalin died where it officially had no words to the song. And we'll see you next time on Twilight Struggle. Play the experts.